It's a great story. And it's a great example and really sort of a stepping stone, probably to your most recent book, well, one of the two more recent books entitled Saving Us, A Climate Scientist's Case for Hope and Healing in a Divided World. And I read the book this summer, and as an English professor who cares deeply about accessible storytelling and also the climate crisis, I just loved the book and found it so approachable and really important in ways that really widen discussions and can bring a lot of people around the table. I wondered if you could just share with our listeners kind of a short summary of, this book, maybe your research and projects, anything you really want to talk about to ground our listeners in your approach to climate change.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you so much. That means so much from someone who's a professional in literature, so to speak. I know that when I read books, and they're nonfiction books, stories are really important. There's only so many facts I feel like you can absorb. And so I really tried hard to make sure that a lot of what I was talking about in Saving Us was story-based. So writing a book is a huge endeavor. And I only ever write a book when there are so many questions I'm getting that I don't have a resource to give people that directly answers those questions. So, for example, the book I wrote with my husband back in 2008 was to address a lot of the questions we were hearing from our fellow Christians. But over the last 5 or 6 years, wherever I was going, whoever I was speaking to, I could be speaking to a group of students or a group of climate scientists. I could be speaking to healthcare professionals or architects. I could be speaking to Catholic nuns or professors in Christian universities. Wherever I was, whoever I was speaking to, I was noticing that the same two questions were coming up again and again. And those questions were, what gives you hope? Or the flip side often was, are we doomed? Is it too late? Are we screwed? So what gives you hope? And what can I do about it? So that's why I wrote Saving Us. I didn't write it for the 10% of people who are dismissive, who are convinced this is a hoax. I wrote it for the majority of people who are worried. 70% of people in the US are worried today. 85% of young people are worried. Every Christian college I go to, and I've been to just about all of them, including some very conservative ones, most students are worried about climate change, but we don't know what to do. So across the whole US, 70% are worried, but only 8% are activated. That means there is 62% of people who are worried but not activated. So that's who I wrote the book to. People who already understand this is a big problem, but we don't know what to do about it. And the more worried we get, often the more paralyzed we get.
Yeah, and I appreciate your highlighting and your focusing on the desire to activate people and to give people hopeful motivations for collaborating and for being active about these things. I appreciate that. And as I've learned more about your work, even preparing for this podcast, one of the things that surprised me a bit, frankly, and at least was very interesting to me, are some of the parallels I see between what you do and my work in interreligious studies and interfaith engagements, which is where I work. And this podcast actually has a fairly diverse audience, religiously diverse and otherwise. And I was specifically intrigued by the kind of double move that you seem to make. On one hand, focusing on what people have in common with regard to climate change, common experiences, common concerns, and so forth, while on the other hand, acknowledging and even honoring the different worldviews that people have, sometimes even irreconcilable assumptions about the issues or very, very different motivations for addressing them. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that part of it a little bit more. How do you understand and how do you navigate the relationship between common ground that we all seek and the different or even mutually exclusive ideas and motives that people often have as you try to get people activated and to work together in collaboration?
Well, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head there. In fact, I feel like you could take Saving Us and you could just do like a search and replace. And you could take out climate change and you could put in almost any other hot button issue and most of the book would still make sense. Because it really is about how to get along over a contentious issue. And climate change is, and has been for the last 20 years, the most politically polarized issue in the U.S. But you could also put, COVID response in there. You could put interfaith issues in there. You could put all kinds of contentious issues in there. And I think that a word that we haven't mentioned yet is really important, and that's the word respect. Respecting that people with different perspectives, different life experiences, different priorities, and if we can find what we have in common, and I'm truly convinced that what we have in common is far more than what divides us, as different as we may look on the surface. If we can find what we have in common, then we can each bring our differences as strengths rather than as weaknesses or points of contention to what we all have in common. So the way I think about it these days is my goal is to activate people to work on climate. And I have a certain number of doorways to that work for me. The biggest doorway for me, obviously, is my faith. And I know that every major world religion has traditions of caring for nature or creation and traditions of caring for those less fortunate than us. So it's not just unique to the Protestant faith. You see it in Catholicism, you see it in Orthodox Christianity, you see it in the Jewish faith, you see it in the Muslim faith, you see it in the Hindu faith. So faith is a big door that leads a lot of people to caring about climate action. And we see this, for example, in the Pope's encyclical. He just wrote an update to his encyclical recently this past year, and it is a barn burner. I mean, I thought my phone was going to burst into flames reading what the Pope had to say about poverty and love and equality and climate action. But there's other doorways too. So for example, for somebody else, being a parent could be the most important thing for them. For somebody else, they could have served in the military. So national security could be what's most important. For somebody else, it might be a very strong sense of place and how that place is changing. So we all come to this from different perspectives. But what we agree on is that someone, something, someplace that we love is at risk, and the values, the priorities, the beliefs we already have are exactly what we need to care about this issue. And in fact, caring about it and acting on it will make us an even more genuine version of who we are, whether it is a Christian who's better expressing God's love, or whether it is an outdoor sports person who's being a better steward of the environment, or whether it's a more caring parent or a more shrewd and savvy business person. It makes us an even better version of who we already are. And so that's where I think I come at this issue from, is it's just really important to focus on what we have in common. And what's interesting is you can identify dozens of different ways that people come at this. I mean, there are associations of winter athletes who care about climate change. There are associations of Rotarians who care about climate change. But an organization I work with called Potential Energy, they helped me to co-found Science Moms. I'm part of an organization called Science Moms. It's mothers who care about their kids' future, so they care about climate change. Potential Energy just finished a survey of people across the world, about 70% of the world's population. And they found that although we all live in different places, we speak different languages, we have different life situations, they found that the reason why people are worried about climate change and are willing to engage in climate action all boils down to a single word. And when I heard them give this presentation, 97 slides full of data, and they kind of got to the end, and they said, and that word is, I sort of laughed to myself because I'm like, oh, I bet it's one of my most mentioned words in Saving Us. And sure enough, that word had 4 letters, and it began with an L, and it was love. And I'm like, well, if you had just read the Bible or any other religious text, you probably could have come up with that word already. But it just shows how central that is to human experience. When it all comes down to it, love is what motivates us to act.